everybody. We're going to start the recording now, and we're going to welcome you to our last session of Travel with Bridget. And the most amazing thing about this session is not only we have Travel with Bridget, but we have Travel with Louise. So Bridget and Louise, will you give us a sign and show us who you are? And yay. We welcome you guys. We thank you for your time and energy, and we're really excited to travel with you today and hear about your experiences. So Bridget, let's start you out, and you are ready to go whenever you want to share.
All righty. So I think
I'm going to ask everybody else to please mute yourself so we can all hear Bridget and Louise, okay? And if you have a question, just stick it in the chat.
So officially, again, hi guys. I'm so excited about today, and thanks for the intrepid travelers that have been with us through this whole series, and welcome to all of our newcomers. As Jillian said, we have a special guest today, Luis, and I'm really excited to introduce him in a couple of minutes, but I just want to give you a little bit of background because we're going to Nepal, and I am going to show you a little bit about my experience in Nepal going to Everest Base Camp. Wait, let's see where, I think I'm going to, so when I had this opportunity to go, and I was invited by an organization called Trekking for Kids to go to Everest Base Camp. So the first thing I did was look at a map and find out where that exactly was. So as you can see in the little inset, the red, that's Nepal. It's very small. It's in between Tibet and India. And you fly into Kathmandu, that you can see in the circle. And then you fly from Kathmandu to a small town called Lukla, and then that begins your trek. I went in 2010. So anyway, so this is just briefly what I did. So you can see down in the bottom, Kathmandu, and then Lukla, that little town down below. And it's, as it says, it's about 77 miles walking all the way up, and you stop in these beautiful little towns along the way, and you eventually get to Everest Base Camp. Now, just to give you a little perspective about what this is like, Washington, D.C. has an altitude of 2,500 feet. Lukla, where we start, is 9,000. So immediately you're already in some altitude. And then by the time you get to base camp, you're at about 18,000. And the highest peak in America, North America, is about just under 15. So base camp is about 3,000 to 4,000 feet higher than anything in our country. So it's a big, wow. It's a big endeavor. It's a big trek, and it's really fun. As you go through, you will see just everywhere you look, you're surrounded by the Himalayas, you've got prayer flags, and because you're in a very spiritual country, Nepal, you're at 15,000 feet. This is the site that I saw. It's a beautiful monastery, and just everywhere you look, it's colors and people and villages and beautiful. So part of what we were doing when we were there, as I said, I went with Trekking for Kids, and this organization, we raise money in advance. And then when we get to the country, and in Nepal is where, in Kathmandu, we work in an orphanage, and we help make improvements, and we work with the kids. And that's how I met Luis. And, I just wanted to show you, once I got to my summit, which was base camp and just a little above, this was the view, and it was just really beautiful. But I just want to talk about Trekking for Kids. This was the orphanage where we worked, and these girls were there, and they were all the kids were so much fun. And so what we got out of it and working with them was so much more than anything that they got out of it, even though we were making improvements on the orphanage and we helped them. But the goal is, we're in these beautiful places and we're trekking, and we're leaving something behind for the kids, basically, that are in the shadows of these beautiful, they don't have the same advantages we have. But along the way, I've done a couple Trekking for Kids trips, and that's where I met Luis. And the reason I wanted him to come on today is he and Jillian have a lot in common. Luis, in and of himself, he's climbed all over the world. He's summited Everest 8 times, which, that's just beyond rock star status anyway. But what I loved about Luis when I met him, and what inspired me, is in and of himself, he can do all these things, but he was dedicating his time to give back. And he's volunteering with Trekking for Kids. He's volunteering with Wounded Warriors. He's taking Eric, who he can tell you a little bit more about, up Everest. And it's just sort of his bigger purpose and wanting, he could just go on for himself, and so could Jillian, but they both said, wanted to do more. And that's what Main Street's all about, is not just Nickel, but everybody. And I just thought the parallel, and when we started talking about this, I didn't even know it was the eve of the ribbon cutting. So I just think it's so cool that this is how we're coming together today. And just to give you a little bit more, and then I'm going to hand it over to Luis. This is what I did. I went from Lukla to base camp. This is what you do when you go to Everest. You start at base camp. So my big summit was getting to base camp, and I'm really proud of that because it was really hard. But then it's like, being going out and golfing and then being Tiger Woods, basically. So I'm golfing over here, and then there's Tiger Woods up here. So that's Luis, and I'm going to hand it over to him now and let him give you his story, and then I think we'll have some time for questions. But Luis, thanks for being here, and here we go.
Bridget, that was an excellent graphic. Did you do that yourself? That's pretty good.
I needed a PowerPoint, Luis.
Wow. Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me join you today to share a little bit of my story. As it's been alluded to, I've spent a lot of time in my life in the big mountains. And so I want to ask you, do you see the wrong screen, correct?
We see the flags.
All you see is the flags?
No, you see everything.
No, there are thumbnails at the bottom.
There is,
Oh,
yep.
okay.
So it's the wrong screen. So I'm going to go back in and figure that out. So in essence, what I want to share with you today is a bit of my journey, and not only on Everest, but really how I got there and deciding to think and dream a little bit bigger and to expand your idea of what's possible. So I'll stop there. Does everybody just see flags now, except for these little things down at the bottom?
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, to get us started, I didn't just wake up one day and decide to climb Mount Everest. This journey for me started at an incredibly young age. This is from the summit a couple of years ago. And in the picture you see on the right, the CEO of the guiding company that I worked at as the COO, which is the Chief Operating Officer. And the gentleman on the left is our Chief Marketing Officer. So why senior leadership for a company was climbing Everest on the same day, I couldn't tell you. But it really started a long time ago when I was the age of a lot of people that I see on the screen today. Believe it or not, I was born with debilitating asthma and allergies and really couldn't go outside all that much till I was about 10 years old. I spent a lot of time in the emergency room when I was a kid. Some of my favorite stories of the things that I was allergic to that would cause an allergy or an asthma attack were if a neighbor mowed their grass and my window was open and grass clippings filtered in, that would cause an asthma attack. If the house got too dusty, that would send me to the hospital. Or my favorite, because it's one of my favorite foods now, if I ate any cheese or came into contact with any cheese, it would send me to the hospital with an asthma attack. So really, at a young age, I couldn't play outside all that much. And I became a voracious reader. I read everything that I could get my hands on. And what I really focused on reading was my dad's collection of National Geographic magazines. And one day I came across an article about the first American to climb Mount Everest. And it turns out that the first American to climb Mount Everest, a gentleman by the name of Lou Whitaker, also had really bad asthma and really bad allergies. And it turns out that when he was a little kid, his parents used to make him swim in high alpine lakes and they lived up in Washington State, they'd take them to Mount Rainier to go climbing because the high altitude air helped his lungs get stronger. And so I remember being 8 years old and walking into my parents' bedroom with this magazine and saying, this guy has what I have. And so that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to be a mountain guide. So whenever anybody would ask me about, little boy, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'd look them square in the eye and I'd say, I want to be a mountain guide. I want to climb Mount Everest. And then I'd have to take a hit off my inhaler because I got wheezy. And that was the reality of my life as a small child. But, I often find that the journey between what you dream about and what you hope for and what you end up doing can get a little bit closer depending on what you focus on. And so for me, my journey of becoming a mountain guide, like most careers, involved a lot of hard work, a lot of efforts to learn how to get my lungs healthy in order to be able to breathe at high altitude, and bit by bit, getting more and more jobs on mountains all over the world to really focus on climbing at a very high level. And to Bridget's point, always having the dream of going and climbing Mount Everest, which is the biggest mountain on the planet. What I eventually ended up doing was working for a company that guided the 7 summits. So if you don't know what the 7 summits are or what they're about, it's sort of like the highest level of mountaineering, climbing the highest point on each of the 7 continents. You can see them listed on the screen in front of you. And eventually I ended up working for a company that guided all of these mountains, Endeavor Consulting, a company out of New Zealand. And the only one that I kept not being able to do, I had done all of the other ones multiple times, but I hadn't been to Mount Everest. And despite what you may have heard in the media about Mount Everest, or what articles that you've read about, a lot of people go and, it's made it a lot easier, it is still the biggest mountain on earth. And I know every single one of us faces complex problems in our day-to-day lives. And when you think about the effort of climbing a mountain like this, a lot of people think about those magazine articles that I was talking about. It's the pretty pictures in National Geographic, it's the fun stuff. But we all know when we're facing a project or a process that's hard, it's the hard work that isn't the glamorous stuff. It feels a little bit more like this. You get very, very good at dragging a lot of equipment all over the world. And for your clients, becoming everything from their doctor, lawyer, engineer, priest, rabbi, politician, support group, therapist, you are really responsible for a person's entire well-being when you go on these expeditions. And so year after year, I was guiding all of these trips, never having gone to Mount Everest until I met a very unique individual. So don't let the monk hat fool you. He's not a monk, but he is a very, very snappy dresser. This is Eric Weinmare. He is the only blind person to ever climb Mount Everest. And when I sat down with him at lunch one day to ask him what his aspiration was in the Himalayas, not knowing what he wanted to talk about, Eric said, I want to be the first blind person to climb Mount Everest because I'm tired of people telling me what I can and can't do, what I am and am not capable of. And so I was wondering, Luis, if you'd be interested in being one of my guides. Having grown up with asthma and spent a childhood where people would tell me what I was and wasn't capable of, what I could and couldn't do, I accepted his offer on the spot. And so an expedition to Mount Everest takes about 3 months. You heard about Bridget's trek of 77 miles to base camp, which takes a couple of weeks. Well, that 77-mile walk is just the start of our expedition, arriving at the bottom of base camp. And for any of you that really, really like math or statistics, it's like one of those math problems you have in school, where if Luis leaves home with 5 tons of food, fuel, and equipment, flies 5,000 miles, rents 2 Russian helicopters, and hires 147 yaks and porters to walk 77 miles to get to the bottom of the mountain to start the expedition, how many dollars will Luis have left over at the end of the trip? It's one of these massively complex logistical problems where there were mornings where I would wake up and say, you know, I know my toothbrush is in a yellow duffel bag, but it's on the back of that yak and it's about a mile up the trail. I guess I'm not brushing my teeth this morning. So in the midst of this whole process, you're also focusing on this tremendous journey that's in front of you. So much like what Bridget talked about, you can see that just arriving to the bottom of the mountain, you see the various camps, Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, and Camp 4 at the different elevations, all the way up to the summit at 29,035 feet. So if you've ever flown in a plane before, that's about the elevation that most planes allow you to take off your safety belt, get up and walk around and go to the bathroom. So whenever you level off when you're flying and you're allowed to get up, you know that that's about the summit of Mount Everest, where we're going. And this was our team with Eric. And we had a couple of important sponsors that I'll point out to you, because I think it's important to understand, you know, much like Main Street, it's always good to have partners that believe what you believe and are deeply connected through community. And our two sponsors for this trip were the National Federation of the Blind, which Eric brought to the expedition, and Allegra, my allergy medicine, paid for the other half of the trip. So we used to like to joke that this was the blind leading the sneezy, or the sneezy leading the blind, depending on who you were talking to that day. It was a great expedition. We had a lot of trekkers that, much like Bridget's group, would come and visit the team and then go back down valley. But really, we were there for the business of climbing the mountain. Above 24,000 feet, you start to use oxygen. So we had to ensure that our oxygen systems were ready. And, you know, if you've been in mountains before, you know that there's it's a typical camping scene at the bottom of the mountain. But when you really understood that you were in a different place, unlike any place else on earth, was when it would start to snow. You'd hear this low rumble outside of the tent, and somebody would stick their head inside and say, "You guys have to come out here and see this." And we'd all pile outside of the tent and see these avalanches ripping off 4,000-foot alpine walls that would hit the valley floor with such intensity that if you had a cup of water in front of you, the water in that cup would ripple just from the impact of the avalanche hitting the valley floor. And we were just getting started on our expedition. So we would raise the prayer flags over base camp, do a special blessing ceremony with our Sherpas, which is a tribe that actually lives at the base of the mountain, and then gear up and prepare to head into the bottom of the mountain. Now, if any of you have ever studied glaciers before, you know that the cracks in a glacier, which are called crevasses, can be pretty deep and pretty wide and oftentimes pretty scary. And when you see these ladders coming up from down valley, you know that sometimes these cracks in the glacier are so big that you need to strap some of these ladders together just to be able to get over or across some of these crevasses. You know this in your head, but you're never quite fully prepared when you come around the corner and see something like this, an 120-foot wall of ice that with 9 sections of ladder strapped together was the only way to get over this wall of ice. The bottom of the mountain is an incredibly scary and dangerous place. And when you finally pop up over this lip and you get to the top and you walk into Camp 1, there's this sense of relief. Even though you're living at higher than any point in the United States, it's flat, as you can see. And you may think, well, gosh, Luis, this looks like camping in the winter. That seems kind of fun. It looks kind of fun. Well, yes, it's flat in this part of Everest, and we do have fun, but you're always looking at this peak that is literally 2 miles above your head. And you're constantly asking yourself, how on earth are we going to get us and all of our stuff in a place where we're going to be ready to climb this peak? So you have to go slowly because your body's getting used to the elevation. So if I took you out of the room you're sitting in right now and I magically transported you to the summit of Mount Everest, you'd be unconscious in about 5 minutes and dead in about 10 minutes because of the altitude change. Your body needs time to adjust, which is why we would go up slow to a camp, go all the way down to base camp and rest, go a little bit higher to another camp, come all the way back down and rest. You spend weeks and months moving things and getting your body adjusted to the altitude as you move up the mountain. And eventually you get to Camp 2, which is about halfway up the peak. But still, again, this wall that you're looking at behind our camp is about 4,000 feet high. And the skyline that you see is only where Camp 4 is. So you still have a few thousand feet above what you see of climbing in front of us. So to give you an idea of the landmarks on this wall, you can see from Camp 2 that about halfway up the wall, perched like a bird's nest, is where Camp 3 would be, and over working your way left to a rock climb called the Geneva Spur to get into the South Col, that's where Camp 4 is at 26,000 feet above sea level. And one night I was sitting out at sunset and I took this beautiful picture, and we had been on the mountain with Eric for a couple of months at this point. And if you do any searching on YouTube or Google, you'll see that a lot of the articles that were being written about our expedition was that it was a stunt. We were going to get Eric hurt. A blind person didn't belong on Everest. We were being irresponsible taking Eric to Everest. And so when Eric was walking by back to his tent, a lot of us would use verbal communication with him to guide him to his tent and back. I saw this scene. I said, "Oh, let me take a picture of you, buddy. This is really pretty." And then I called him over to sit down next to me. And, we started talking about how proud I was of our team. We were higher than any blind person had been on Everest before. We were all healthy, happy, and that in my mind, we had already succeeded. We had proven everybody wrong. And I told Eric all of these things thinking that he was going to agree with me and that we were going to hug, he was going to go to bed, and that was going to be it. Instead, he got this strange look on his face and he said, Luis, if you think that this is as much as we can do and that this is all we're capable of doing, you should probably go back down to base camp, pack up your stuff, and go home. And I was really confused by that. And I asked him what was wrong because it was clear that he was upset. And he said, you guys get to see where we're going every single day. And when I ask you how big this mountain is, you all say really, really big. And then when I say, well, how big is really big? You say really, really, really big. And you sort of make fun of the fact that every day I have to wake up and find a way to make this impossible thing possible for us. And so I don't want you going for the summit unless you can help me understand how you're going to make this impossible thing possible for not only me, but for the whole team. And, I thought about that a lot, and the context of how we push ourselves to understand that these things that we think are impossible, how do we find a way to make it possible? For me, when I was a kid and I was really sick, going to the mailbox was impossible. Going outside and playing in the grass on a summer day was somewhat impossible. But I had found a way to make it possible. And here was Eric trying to find a way to make it possible to climb Everest while being blind. And I knew that I needed to increase my level of communication and my level of responsibility to not only him, but our whole team. Because when you leave Camp 2 and start heading for Camp 3, the higher you go, the harder it gets. And every breath and every fiber of your being screams at you to turn around. Because little by little, your body starts to eat itself, because on the mountain, it's your muscles are much more complex protein for your body. So it doesn't matter what you're putting in your tummy, your body wants to eat your muscles. So little by little, you're getting skinnier and weaker the higher you go. Again, with this gigantic thing looming over your head. And Eric would ask, well, how big does it look? And instead of saying it looked really big, I would start to describe to him, I called it, how do you eat an elephant? So this is an elephant, right? So the one piece is, Eric, it's big, but we're going to focus on this little piece of terrain that we've got to go over. And let's set a goal for today and a target and be happy with that. And so that's how we started to work our way up the mountain bit by bit, going higher and higher, way above the clouds, or above where most human beings would live. And when we finally got Camp 3 set up, as you can see, dug out like a bird's nest perch halfway up the mountain, this was as high as we were going to go before starting our summit push. If you look in the middle of this picture, way down in the clouds is base camp. And it took us about 2.5 months to get to this elevation. And the reason why we only go to Camp 4 once to leave things is that when we leave here for our summit push, this is when we start to go on oxygen. And we only have so many bottles to get us to the summit and get us back. Now, this isn't like oxygen that you would breathe while you're scuba diving, where it's a seal with your mask. If you lose your scuba gear underwater, you're in big trouble. But on a mountain, it mixes with outside air, so it helps you a little bit, but doesn't take away the pain of being at altitude. So this blue line up to Camp 3 represents about 2 months of effort for our team and a lifetime of dreaming for a lot of us. And as we sat back down at base camp, other teams started to come over to us and ask when we were going to leave for the summit. And we would say, well, we're looking at the weather. We're thinking about early next week, because once everything is set up on the mountain, after a couple of months of effort, it still takes about a week to go from camp to camp to camp to summit and then come all the way back down. Everest is that big. And when we would tell other teams what we were thinking, and then we would ask, well, when are you going to go? They would say, oh, well, we're going to wait until you go, because we don't want to be around for what they said was going to be the inevitable accident of getting Eric hurt. So we realized very quickly that when it came to our summit push, we were going to be on our own. And I knew that succeed or fail, whenever we went, was really going to change and define the rest of my life. So you leave base camp, you head up from Camp 1 to Camp 2 and to Camp 3. And when you're heading into Camp 4, there's this sense of burning the bridge behind you. You really start to understand that you're walking in a place that few human beings have ever visited before. It's kind of like being an astronaut and walking on the moon or going to Mars. And as we approached our tents, I realized that we were going to be in the highest campsite on Earth that night. And when you get to Camp 4 at 26,000 feet, it's a very busy and harsh place. We're setting up tents, we're handing out oxygen bottles, trying to get everybody settled in for the night. And I was just happy to be there. I was incredibly excited to be at Camp 4. The wind was blowing. You can see behind me, there were clouds. You couldn't really see the upper part of the mountain. And I really wanted to see what was in front of us. And finally, the wind picked up, moved the clouds off the mountain. And this is what I saw. Now, if you knew nothing about mountaineering or nothing about mountain climbing, and I showed you this picture first, you would kind of think this is a camp at the bottom of a mountain, right? You would think that we're just getting started. Well, after 2.5 months of effort, this is what it looks like at Camp 4 at 26,000 feet. That's how much more climbing we had to do. And it was, I got to be honest with you, a little upsetting, thinking we were so high, we had come so far, we had worked so hard, and there was still a lot more to go. I was so upset by this. I sat down in the snow and I leaned back against what I thought was a pile of old tent fabric. And I was just dumbfounded by what I was looking at. And a Sherpa friend of mine, Ang Sarin, came over and said, Luis, why don't you get up, come inside the tent, have some tea, and we would, you know, warm up. You shouldn't be sitting outside like this. And I said, Ang Sarin, I'm overwhelmed. This is a big mountain. Just give me a minute and let me rest. He said, no, Luis, you should probably get up and move. Come on, come inside, have some tea, and we can talk about it in the tent. And I finally asked him why he was being so insistent. And he finally said, Luis, you really need to get up and move. You're lying on a dead body. So what I thought was an old tent was actually another human being who had the same goals, the same hopes and aspirations that I did in the exact same place, laid down and never got back up. It was an incredibly scary moment, and I scrambled into my tent and told my tent mates the story, and you can see by my tent mate's face that I managed to scare everybody really quickly by explaining that there's a body right outside of our tent, that we're up here with Eric who can't see, the clouds have parted. Have you seen what it looks like outside? Oh my gosh, we've got so much more to do. I don't know how we're gonna do it. And I managed to really scare everybody else in my tent especially when we're thinking about how to make this impossible thing possible. And right at that moment, Eric called me from his tent to come over and talk to him. And I know he had been talking to other expedition members about what they thought was possible, how we were going to make this impossible thing possible. He hadn't talked to me yet because I thought we had completed our conversation at Camp 2. So I didn't think there was anything more to discuss. But I put on my best face, I put on my down suit, and I crawled over to his tent. I unzipped the door, and this is what I saw. Now, you're already kind of a little loopy from living at 26,000 feet, but here's what I told myself in my head as I was looking at what was in front of me. Guy on the left can see playing cards. Guy on the right can see playing cards. Blind person in the middle playing cards. And because you're loopy at 26,000 feet, I'm like, why is the blind guy playing cards? And he finally said, would you mind coming in here and sitting with me? I think these guys are cheating. So I finally crawled inside of the tent and sat next to him. And he asked me how I was doing. And I said, basically lying through my teeth, it's fine, I'm fine, we're fine, ready to go, I'm going to go take a nap, and that's going to be it, and I hope that's okay, and I got to go because I'm tired, I want to have some soup, see you later, bye. And he stopped me and he said, no, I heard your crack about being up here with a blind guy. Is there a body outside of your tent? And I answered yes. And he said, it sounds like it looks pretty scary up there above us. And I said, yeah, it's looking a little bit more than I thought it was going to be. And he said, you know that conversation we had at Camp 2 about making the impossible things possible? And I said, yes. And he said, well, you know, would you like to hear about how I deal with you guys every single day making the impossible things possible? And I told him that I was all ears. And he said, tonight when we go for the summit, believe in me as much as I believe in you. Believe that I am just as capable in achieving this as I think you are. And maybe, just maybe, we can complete this journey together. I wish I would have had a map of all the landmarks we were going to have to hit that night, because you start climbing Everest for the summit at 10 p.m., leaving the South Col to try to reach the summit the next morning at about 10 a.m. So you have about a 12-hour climb through the night. But all I had outside of my tent door was this very high, very cold, very scary looking mountain that I wasn't quite sure if we were going to be able to achieve what we set out to do. So you get up in the middle of the night to start climbing. And like I explained to you at the beginning of my talk, I had been climbing up to this point in Antarctica and all over the world for years and years and years. I thought I understood what cold was like. And the reality is I had no idea what cold was like based on the temperatures of 100 degrees below zero, where any exposed flesh was in danger of freezing, trying to stay warm through the night as we slowly worked our way higher and higher and higher, really took every ounce of effort that we had. And when the sun finally came up over Tibet, it was the best sunrise that I had ever seen. This is actually the shadow of Mount Everest, with the moon setting behind Mount Everest and the sun rising in front of Mount Everest. And that shadow is actually the shadow of the mountain itself. And all those big, scary Himalayan peaks that I had dreamed about as a kid, we were so far above any other mountain on Earth at that point. That's what they looked like from our vantage point. And as we climbed up slowly but surely, the way we would work with Eric was there was always a guide waiting to rotate in front of him to explain where we were going, and somebody to watch behind him. And at this point on the journey towards the summit, I stepped in front of the line and kept moving towards the summit. And you can see how far above Camp 4 we are. In the upper right-hand part of the screen, you can see all of our little tents down there at Camp 4. And we got to this bump, and Eric said, you know, do you think we're close? And I said, you know, everybody's changing oxygen bottles. I think we're close. We should really go take a look. We've got to be close. We've been climbing all night, and let's see what we see. We got to the top of what turned out to be the South Summit, and this is what we saw. The last piece of Earth left to climb to the summit with 60-mile-an-hour winds screaming from one side into the other. And honestly, I didn't know how to describe it. I stopped so dead in my tracks that Eric bumped into the back of me. And he said, well, what does it look like? A question that he asked a million times before. But here's where my perception of what's possible changed. At this point, I can't lie to you, I was scared. And I was really wondering how I was going to get this done and also keep myself safe and Eric safe. But I turned around and I looked at him and I pulled my oxygen mask down and I said, buddy, it's a cakewalk. It's no harder than anything we've ever done before on this expedition. Stay with me for another couple of hours and we'll be at the summit. As we left the South Summit and started moving towards the top, fortunately, the wind started to die down and we were slowly but surely getting closer and closer to the top. But right near the top, the terrain gets extremely technical. And trying to explain where we were going and what we were doing with Eric took every ounce of strength for all of us. Our whole team had made a promise to each other at base camp that we were there to help Eric achieve his goal, and that if he wasn't going to be able to make it, none of us would go either. And you know, when people ask me about what it means to be a part of a strong family, part of a strong company, part of a strong team, I often share with them that it's potentially sacrificing the things that are important to you to help another person succeed. And so I try to show people this picture whenever I can. And this is every single guide and Sherpa on our team waiting at about 28,000 feet with their oxygen turned down for Eric to summit, keeping that promise that if he wasn't going to make it, none of us were going to go to the top either. And eventually you come around a corner and there's really just no place else to go. 29,038 feet. And you know, people often ask me, you know, Luis, you were successful with Eric. You came back down, you were healthy. Why on earth would you choose to go back again and again and again? You know, I could tell you that it's about helping other people achieve their dreams of summiting, which is partially true. I could tell you that it's also, you know, whenever you do a job, you want to do it to the best of your abilities, do it well, and share these experiences with people that you love and you believe in. And I could tell you stories that I think are inspirational for all day long. But for me, the real magic of being able to do these things comes from the strength of the relationships with the people that I work with every single day and I see every single day. It's really the understanding of how we lift each other up when things are hard, how we encourage each other through times of difficulty, but also times of great joy. You know, I've been lucky enough to travel and climb around the world. And the thing that I always reflect on the most is none of these big ideas or these big goals are possible without help from the people around you. And that help comes only when you bring love to what you're doing. And so the last story I'll share with you is this, and this is more for the adults on the call today, but it's also for you folks that are a little bit younger to understand what you'd like to contribute to the world around you. So this is Ang Sading. He's a Sherpa, and he's one of my very best friends. He's been with me on every single Himalayan expedition that I've ever been on. And after every single trip, I'm always excited to go down and spend time with this guy, his dad. I know he looks to be about 150 years old, and the reality is nobody knows how old he is because Sherpas don't keep records of their birth years. But with Ang Sading translating, I'm always really excited to tell him all the things that we've done together, the success, the failure, how clients were difficult or crazy or really, really good. I'm just always really excited to share with him how proud I am of his son and how much I value his friendship. And every single time he asks me the same thing, translating back from Ang Sading, he says, Lulu, that's my nickname in Nepal, is Lulu. It sounds like you brought a lot of tourists and a lot of money to my valley again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. He's a businessman at heart. But what he says next was something that I'll leave you with. He says, what is it that you and my son do on that mountain that will make my grandchildren's world better? What is it that you do every single day that will make what they have to go through more extraordinary. And so on behalf of all of my friends and all the people that I've learned with, thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you today. And I will end it there and I guess entertain some questions.
Wow, you guys, big hand, right? Luis, you are unbelievable. Oh my God. Bridget, you are absolutely right. And beyond. And beyond. Wow, so incredible. So, yeah, you guys, big hand, right? Like that.
Thank you, Louise.
And the many messages and wow, insights. Thank you so much. So there are a couple questions in the chat I'm going to ask you, and then we'll open it up for everybody else to ask too. One is, what is the cost?
Well, you know, it really depends on where you go and what you do. And now that I'm back on the screen, oh my gosh, I see all these old friends. Austin, holy cow. Look at all you guys. So sorry about that. I'm recognizing some familiar faces. Austin was with me on Kilimanjaro in Africa. So he's a good friend. Hi to your family, Austin. So I guess the costs really depend on if you're going as a guided client, if you're going on the Tibet or Nepal side, how much oxygen do you want? How much Sherpa support do you want? So it can be a pretty expensive endeavor, anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000. But I think as an individual climber that just wants to go and climb, and if you have enough experience as a climber to go, it can be way more affordable than that. But the logistics, the oxygen is from Russia. You have to move a bunch of equipment, food, and fuel to base camp for a 3-month journey. There's really no way around some of those pieces that tend to cost a little bit more.
Wow, thank you. Okay. How much time altogether did you spend there?
3 months. So from the time I leave home to the time I come back to home, the expedition is about 3 months long. So much like Bridget did, typically when we're going into the mountain, we have a team of trekkers. Oftentimes it's the family of the climbers that want to walk that 77 miles to base camp, keep the climbers company because it's going to get lonely after they leave. It's a really fun way to experience the culture and the communities. They leave and then we get down to the business of climbing, which takes another 2.5 months.
Wow, amazing. Oh my God, what a commitment.
Unbelievable.
So a couple other questions. One, I think you answered the temperature already when somebody, I think you did that.
Cold, very cold.
Very cold. And then
well, this is all for all the young people to give you an understanding of how cold it is. To try to understand, when you get to 40 below, Celsius and Fahrenheit is the same. But to give you an idea of what it's like at those temperatures for 40 below and lower, if you have some hot cocoa, and I mean hot cocoa that if you try to take a sip of it, you're like, ooh, that's hot cocoa. If I swish that around in my mug and throw it into the air, it instantaneously crystallizes and falls back down as snow. That's how cold 40 below and colder is.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I could do I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I'm cold right now and I'm in a, I got a sweatshirt on in a warm room. That's amazing. So one other question I have, and then we'll open it up to everybody else, is I think this was from Ulrich, and it was, are there different summits on Everest, or is it just one?
That's a great question. Yep, it truly is one of those mountains that goes to a peak. So the summit itself is about the size of an average dining room table that can seat 6 people. So when there's expeditions coming up from both sides, and if there's a lot of people on summit day, you literally want to be respectful and give people time on the very tippy top. Then they rotate off and you go up, and then they rotate off and somebody else goes up. It's actually a pretty small space on the very top.
Wow. Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing is right. Thank you. So you guys, why don't you are just so unbelievable. I'm going to be talking about you for months. And Austin, I'm trying to look for you right now because we may call you. Maybe you'll host one of our sessions too next.
You should ask him about Africa. Okay,
we will need you for Bridget. Let's note that for fall travel when we add some stuff to fall.
Yeah, I was there too.
You were there too. Okay.
Bridget, your hair looks awful. You need an appointment with me. Stop joking.
Austin and I think we did Chile and Patagonia. So Austin's seen me at my very best and my very worst.
All right. I
That's
love that. And we've seen a little bit of Patagonia, but now we need Kili. So, and I love that you call it Kili. I think it's so cute. You have a little nickname for the mountain. So let's open it up, you guys. Does anybody have a question for Luis? We do have a couple more minutes, but you can just unmute yourself. We can go one at a time.
Hi, Eric. This is Veronica and Kyle. And I post this in the chat box also, but I'm reading Eric's book, No Barriers, and when he kayaks the Grand Canyon. But one of the quotes he says in the book is that his expedition leader on Everest told him when he was done, said, quote, "Don't make Everest the greatest thing you ever do," unquote. So I just thought that was really cool. And I wondered which expedition leader had told him that when he was finished.
So we were all very young, impressionable guides on that trip, and we had a strong Italian fella that was our expedition leader, Pasquale Vincenzo Scarturo. He is an amazing man, has led a lot of expeditions, and that was his nickname is PV for Pasquale Vincenzo. PV said that to Eric, and actually said that to all of us. He's a brilliant expedition leader. And stay tuned. We're planning our 20th anniversary trip, and we're going to get all the old crusty mountain guides out for another expedition and see what we can cook up.
Unbelievable.
Wow, so cool.
He actually, that's a good point. He wrote a book about the expedition called, I get it confused with the documentary. It's either Touch the Top of the World or Farther Than the Eye Can See, one of the two. One of them's a documentary, one of them's the book. So there's a couple of different things out there that is about the expedition.
Yeah, Touch the Top of the World is the book. And then
Is
the
that it?
kayak
Okay.
one, the kayak one is No Barriers.
Nice. Thank you for that. If anybody's interested, we can follow up with that in an email. Sija, do you have something to say? Hold on. There you go. Oh, wait.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, Louis, thank you so much for showing us some of the experience from Nepal. You know, I have to say, this is like the biggest mountain I've ever seen. Just like when my parents and I are like a big fan of every national park we went to. But as you had mentioned, like wherever it's Nepal, it's like the coldest place probably people have ever experienced. Like you can see some flags are waving outside. Some people are like wearing cold and everything. Like it's just like winter wonderland. Everything's like smells like the white experience. Like people could ever see like the hugest mountain. Like wherever you've gone, everywhere across like Asia, I have to say. Whatever compared to going to other Europe or other Antarctica, I have to say this is just gorgeous. So how would it compare to like people going to like national park as compared to like coldest?
That's a good way to ask the question, because that's it's definitely cold. And I think, you know, it's interesting, and a little bit of science here. So the higher you are, the thinner the air is. And so when the sun goes down or you're in the shade, that's when it gets really, really cold. But if you're sitting in the sunshine, much like in a national park, you warm up really, really quickly. And also if you're walking and you're exerting energy, that also keeps you warm. So don't let the cold scare you. The cold that I was talking about was really high up on the mountain. But going to base camp or going to a national park, you know, and this is my own personal belief, I think it's good if people are cold every once in a while and uncomfortable every once in a while. How many of you have ever stood outside in a rainstorm and instead of running for the door, consciously let yourself get wet, a little bit wet? Anybody? Yeah? Or you're playing in the snow and you get a little bit wet and cold and uncomfortable. You know, I think there's something to that. And for me, it helps me feel a little bit more alive. I'm not asking anybody to stay outside and catch a cold and stand in the rain for an hour, but to be able to experience some of those things just because, I think that's kind of the majesty of our national parks and some of the beauty of what we do.
Love it.
That was lovely.
So inspiring.
So inspiring.
So, are there any other questions, or should I shoot the little polling?
Yeah, why don't we're gonna, Luis, we always do this at the end of every session, and we're gonna do the 3-question poll to get some information from everybody. We really like everybody's feedback. Thank you, Elisa, for doing that, for being on here and doing that. This was an unbelievable experience, I think. I mean, it's probably going to be the closest thing I get to going to Everest. In fact, Luis, while you were speaking, you can launch the poll, Elisa.
Oh, I did. Look at that.
I don't see it on mine. Okay, good. I'm glad it's there. While you were speaking, my husband is on the line also. He's upstairs, and he texted me, of course, to say like how unbelievable you are. And he also said, why don't we do base camp? And I wrote him back, unless you can get a portable heater that's going with me, I'm not going.
Scott, don't worry about it. We'll figure that out.
Exactly.
That's fine. Ask Bridget. Like, if we can get Bridget to base camp.
Yeah, exactly. I think Scott can go with Bridget, and I'll hang here and drink a couple beers with Fred. And
you'll be okay.
The funny thing about it is it was the hardest thing. It launched everything. And this is why I'm now here in this travel series, Jillian. It just changed my life. And it was so hard. And I would do it again tomorrow if I could. It's the most beautiful place.
Well, and that's what I want to encourage everybody, especially the young folks on the call. And I'll leave it with this as you do the survey. You know, for me, the small challenges when I was a kid and I couldn't really breathe well was just walking around the block, or going to the mailbox, or trying to hold my big thing for getting my lungs stronger was holding my breath in a swimming pool and seeing how long I could stay underwater before I would have to pop up. You have to find out what your Everest is and challenge yourself to try to get there. Don't pick the thing you know you can do. Pick the thing you're not quite sure if you can do, and find a way to make it a reality. That doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come overnight. But I often find those moments of trying a little bit and failing quite a bit are often the ones that are the most magical and the most special.
That is absolutely beautiful. And
so figure out what that is and get after it.
That's right. Sisha, I like Sisha going like this. All right. That's awesome.
And this goes for all the older folks on the call too.
Hallelujah.
It isn't going
do it, you guys. We can do it.
For yourselves too.
That's right. Big hand, and Luis, there's the chat was like all on fire about how wonderful you are, and thank you to Bridget. And the chat was like about how everybody's, you know, so grateful, and thank you for your inspiration, your hard work. And to end it, I will say I feel so inspired. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm hoping it'll be something. I hope everybody else walks away feeling like this too, and maybe share this gift with somebody else too. We have this recorded. Happy to send it out to the world so that everybody feels inspired by Luis and by Bridget and their experiences. And namaste. Thank you so much for being our teacher today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Luis.
Great rest of your summer.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Great rest of your summer.
Good luck tomorrow, guys.
Right. So, yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow at the ribbon cutting.
Yep.
Yeah, don't forget.
There. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.